Welcome back. My name is Jen Byer, and I am the host of the Find Your Peace podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about relief versus regulation when discussing the nervous system. And I think these two get confused a lot. And so I'm just going to break down what each one can look like a little bit. So, most of the time, people start doing nervous system regulation work because they are in survival mode. And survival mode isn't just a state that we visit, that is a place that we've been living. It's become a deeply ingrained pattern. It lives in our bodies. It just hijacks about all of our emotions and everything we think, do, and say. This is when we feel completely out of control. And this is where most people start seeking help because they realize that this isn't just a switch to turn off. So the opposite of survival would be safety. When we feel safe in our bodies, when we feel like we're at peace, we feel like we can be fully ourselves and still be in a place of peace. But how do we get there? I do highly suggest if you didn't listen to last week's episode when I talk about navigating the stages of nervous system healing and the stages that we all go through when we're healing, I highly recommend you listen to that because this is just going a little bit deeper. Because there's a difference between finding relief when we've been in survival mode and just getting a glimpse of peace versus living at peace. And so relief would look like finding a glimpse of peace, finding a tool to implement at the right time that pulls us out of fight or flight. It's immediate, it's automatic, moves us out of that state of being. Momentarily soothing. We feel a little bit better. We feel a little bit of that peace. But usually it ends in shame and discomfort afterwards because we're not fully regulated yet. But where most people get confused is they think that relief equals regulation. And then when they circle back to their survival pattern, because it hasn't been broken yet, they assume they're doing something wrong. And this is where most people quit. So regulation is a way of being. This is where we've built capacity within our nervous system to handle life a little bit better. Now, when people are dysregulated, that doesn't mean that they didn't handle life. Sometimes people go through really hard things. Both of my parents died within a very short period of time. I had cancer. I had Lyme's disease. My son had Lyme's disease at the same time and was going through some very life-threatening things. Like all of these things led to the place where I was in survival mode. I was also raised in a home where how and I was spoken to and how things were spoken over me just created this pattern of a deeply broken identity. Okay. So when I say survival mode, that is not an attack on anyone's character. We all have reasons for why we got where we are. It is just language that we're using to identify the two. Okay. So when we've built a place where we live regulated, when we've built that capacity, here's some of the things that are going to show up. Uh, Life is a little bit slower internally. So not everything feels rushed and urgent anymore. It can feel a little less rewarding at first because that relief place is so freeing to get out of that state of being where that cortisol and adrenaline is pumping all the time that it feels good. So when we are just living regulated, it feels a little less rewarding. So it can feel underwhelming sometimes to people when we've just learned to live there. It requires presence and engagement. So it has to be a permanent shift to create white space within your life. What does that look like? So for me, it looks like not constantly picking up my phone every time I have a free second, not constantly giving input to my brain. So I don't need to have a podcast on 24/7. I don't need to have music on 24/7. Sometimes I'm just okay with being in my thoughts. For me, it looks like leaving an extra 10 to 15 minutes anytime I have to drive somewhere so I'm not frantic the whole time trying to get there on time. That way, if I hit traffic or road construction or anything, I can still arrive at peace because one of my personal values is being on time. And so that can trigger me a little bit. And so I've built in things. Every time I get in my car, I take a deep grounding breath before I pull out of my driveway. I put the address in my navigation system before I'm driving. So I'm not trying to drive and do that at the same time. All of those things for me make me feel rushed and everything feel urgent. And I have chosen to live from a place of being regulated, so I don't do those things anymore. Hopefully that makes sense. Some more signs that you're living in regulation. You've built capacity for the things that life throws at you, and not everything feels like a level 10 threat. So obviously, when I was going through this time period of, both of my parents dying, my dad died very suddenly. My mom got sick shortly after, and it took her about 18 months to pass. And um, so that felt like I needed to build capacity within that, right? So every day I would just implement the best I could, knowing that I would have a lot more to deal with when they were gone. But I'd build such a foundation before that that it didn't totally put me into survival mode by the time that my mom passed, right? That was a 2 year span of where I was just in trauma. Like I couldn't control that she was having to go be admitted to the hospital every other week, or when we put her in hospice, or we had to put her back in, rehab for the third or fourth time because every time she'd go into the hospital, she'd be so sedentary. She needed to go back to rehabilitation facility every single time to gain back her strength so she could take care of herself. Like it was a constant state of emergency for 2 years. And so I couldn't control that, but I could control what I was doing. And I built capacity to be able to handle that during that time and before that time. But regulation looks like the more time you spend at peace and the more time it gives your nervous system to heal. So, meaning that the times at peace, you're really embodying that peace, you're enjoying that peace, you're not looking for the next threat and trying to return to that state of hypervigilance. The state of safety has become a deeply ingrained pattern, so much so that you're able to identify things that make you feel unsafe. And so, let me just be super clear that this doesn't always mean physically unsafe. There's a handful of people. This is just a great example, and I'm not going to give away names, but there's someone in my life that I have to see on a fairly regular basis who will hug me, and they do not mean anything by it, but they will not let me go. And that makes me feel unsafe for a fraction of a second, a handful of seconds, whatever it is. And so I've just chosen to avoid hugging this person. It's not somebody I feel comfortable enough to share that with because it would be received the wrong way. And I know that from previous history. And so I just choose to kind of avoid hugging this person. I'm still polite, I'm still loving. It makes me feel unsafe. And I am not saying that they are even doing anything wrong, but the way they hug and the way they won't let me go makes me feel unsafe. And I'm not saying they're an unsafe person. Maybe some of you can relate to that situation, but maybe your person is unsafe. In my situation, this person's never made me feel unsafe except for the way that they hug me, and I don't care for it. And so I choose not to do it because it just sets off alarm bells in my body and it makes me feel unsafe. Some other things that make me feel unsafe is when I'm in an environment uh, and I can tell that I am, how do I put this? I can tell I'm not welcome, right? Maybe they tolerate your presence, but maybe that you are not welcome to come sit at the table. And so I just choose not to participate in those areas anymore. We have some handful of people that used to be very prominent in our lives, mine and my husband's life. And there has been some very unkind things that have happened over the years, and I've just expanded my areas of friendship to be people that really love the Lord and love like the Lord. And that is not this group of people. And so I just choose to avoid them because I always feel self-conscious when I'm around them. And I've done a ton of work not to feel self-conscious anymore. But I don't think that's where it's coming from. after doing all this work, right? I think it really is coming from this group of people. And so I just choose not to be around them or keep it to a very minimum, right? When I do have to interact with them, when I do see them, I'm very polite, I'm very loving, but they just don't get access to my inner world anymore. What regulation looks like also is not pushing to override your body when it does feel unsafe. So, a great example of that would be the hug example I just gave you. Uh, I could keep the peace in the air by just hugging this person, right? But I'm overriding my body's signals of feeling unsafe. And I've just chosen not to do that anymore. So I just avoid hugging. And luckily, this person has never confronted me. I don't think we have that close of a relationship where they would, but I just avoid it. So, ways that we can continue to grow regulation in our life that I will never stop repeating. So, I know I say this on just about every podcast, but I'm always going to it. Next time you're waiting in line, resist the urge to pull out your phone. We used to have all these built in areas that we could just regulate, like thinking about sitting in a doctor's office, waiting for your appointment, standing in line, sitting at a stoplight. We had all of those things implemented that naturally just gave our nervous system room to breathe, room to reset. And we don't have those anymore. Even if you are sitting at a stoplight, I can count just about every single time I drive, people are pulling out their phones at stoplights, even though it's illegal, or they're turning up the music, or they're trying to take care of a task. And we don't create spaces for our nervous system to just be anymore. And that is absolutely necessary in order to live from this place of being regulated. So, more signs that your nervous system is healing. I just did a whole episode, like I said, on this, but I just think that we can continue to reiterate some of these things because the nervous system is so complex and so broad that sometimes we need to hear them over and over before they stick. I've shared with you guys, I knew this stuff for 2 decades before I fully started implementing it. Well, maybe not quite 2 decades. That's an exaggeration, but you get my idea. I knew it for a very long time. I had seen my own nervous system therapist, and I kind of blew off a lot of the stuff that she said to me because it didn't work within the first 24 hours, right? And once I started learning that I have to implement it and build capacity, and it does feel a little bit worse before it gets better, and really went after it when the Lord was like, this is the key to unlocking all your health issues, everything changed for me. Okay. So signs are moving towards healing. You can handle uncertainty without spiraling. So a lot of times when you're in survival mode, uncertainty can feel like you're unsafe. And when you start to move towards regulation, you can handle a little bit of uncertainty without your emotions being hijacked. So that's a great sign. Uh, because uncertainty feels like a threat when we're in survival mode. And if we can just sit with that and engage the homeostasis, we can engage our higher thinking brain by using a tool so we can regulate, so we can think clearly. We start to understand that things are not a threat and we get a little bit of taste of that peace or relief. So the more often we do tools that implement relief, the more regulated we're going to be. Number two, stillness stops feeling like a threat. When we first start implementing a lot of these tools and putting down our phone or going for a walk without any input, without a podcast in our ears or music, it feels unsafe. It feels really unsteady. That's why most people are like, I tried to pray or I try to do this and I feel like my symptoms get worse. That's your body talking to you. That's your body saying, thank you for finally paying attention to me. I actually need more help than you can think, than you know. And so that's not a sign to shove it back down and turn it off. That's a sign to engage. And this is exactly what your body needs. Because stillness can feel like a trap. But when you start to regulate, it starts to feel like peace. It starts to feel like a happy place to be. Number three, you can have big emotions and not feel hijacked by them, right? You can allow anger to happen, move through it, process it, do the forgiveness work that you need to do, maybe add a somatic tool, or maybe vent to a friend or therapist, a safe person, and it moves through you quickly. Number four, small joys are coming back. When joy starts to return, It is a fantastic sign. I have a whole joy practice that I do with my entire family. I can share on an episode. Maybe that's a whole nother episode sometime, but being intentional about joy is unlocks more than we know. There's a whole verse, and I'm totally blanking on which verse it is right now, where it talks about joy is the third of the kingdom of heaven. And so practicing joy will actually move us towards regulation faster. I'm very passionate about that. I just decided right now I'm going to do a whole episode, so stay tuned. Number 5, you are not bracing towards the next bad thing coming. You just get to be. You, when we're in hypervigilance or survival, we are always bracing for the next bad thing to come. Once we've let go of that a little bit, we know that we are operating from a place of being regulated and a place of being at peace. Number 6, your body starts to feel like home again. We don't feel so disassociated from our body or disentangled from our body. So chronic symptoms start to slow down and feel better. Like you just stop noticing that your body's screaming at you all the time for attention because you've been doing the things it needs to do to live regulated. And number 7, not constantly needing reassurance. When people are coming out of survival mode, it is a tough place to be, and people constantly need reassurance. And so when you find yourself not needing that anymore, you know that you're moving into a place of really getting to live at peace. And when you no longer feel at war with yourself, that's where regulation and the peace that surpasses all understanding can really operate. So I hope this episode blessed you today. Reminder that every time we intentionally use a somatic tool, we strengthen our connection to our nervous system and we gain ground. Our body becomes this vessel for safety, and that's where we want to spend the rest of our life, is in safety, safely in the loving arms of Jesus. So if you are looking for help with this, I've mentioned this the last couple episodes. I don't do it just because, well, I am a business, but I didn't have a safe place when I was learning all of this stuff. I didn't have a community around me to practice and implement. I literally just had to rely on me and God. And not that that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. That was a lovely season in my life, but this is an area that He has called me to. I create these tools because I feel a responsibility to all the people out there that are struggling and living in survival mode. I spent most of my life living in hypervigilance, fight or flight, survival mode, and I have found this peace that I have never experienced before. Even though I've known the Lord for over 20 years, I didn't know the peace because I was so dysregulated and in such a state of survival until the last handful of years. I had fleeting moments of peace, but I didn't know what it was like to live in peace until this. So I create these tools and I share them on a regular basis because of the responsibility. So my Regulate Your Nervous System group mentoring program, we practice these things twice a week. It's over the lunch hour, so you can just pause your day quickly and tune in to what your body's telling you, learn to practice these tools, still have time to eat your lunch and go back to work. So it's not taking up your evening, it's not taking up your weekend. There's no homework unless I just give you a tool to practice, but that's not like you need to go read a book and report back. But it's just a safe community where you can learn to use these tools and learn to implement them in a lovely way. And so I just invite you in, if that means, or if that speaks to you, please visit my website under the mentoring program and join us. If you are interested in learning how to do somatic body work, I am offering a training course coming up this fall of 2026. It is 4 weeks of online training and then a 1-day practicum. We'd love to have you join us. The Lord is changing people's lives with this somatic work, and we need more people in the body of Christ that know how to use and implement this. This has been hijacked by the New Age, and we need people that love the Lord and are pulling on the source of creation in order to do this. So be blessed, friends.